Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the En Garde event, in which the Taurus Guardian is added to the game. So, this week we have a lot of things going on. The most noteworthy thing is tomorrow, on Tuesday, around the time that we normally do our stream, we should be getting version 7.0 to Gems of War, and that'll be bringing in shiny cards and a few other mechanics. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what that ends up bringing out, as it seems like it'll be a new upgrading system even beyond what we currently have right now. So we have that to look forward to. Aside from that, I am going to be leaving on a trip this Wednesday and won't be back until about a week. So I will not have any streams or videos going up basically until next week's Thursday, pretty much. Tuesday will be the last time. You might be able to get like one little video out on Wednesday morning just going over 7.0, just kind of recapping everything. And then we probably won't have a video out again until Thursday or so. Or it won't be a video, it'll be a stream, but we'll go from there. But that's pretty much the game plan. So we will be gone for a week, unfortunately happening around the time of the patch. However, luckily the weekend event this weekend is pretty much non-existent since we have Arena. And while we do have a start of a new campaign at the beginning of next week, it's a pretty average one as far as like power gem. It's just you basically get 10 gold whenever you destroy a specific gem. It's more so the synergies, the gold synergies that will come from the troops, more so than the power gem itself, as the power gem next season is really weak, but the troops that come from the season might actually be viable. But anyways, let's start getting over this event. So, as far as the Taurus Guardian is concerned, you end up getting green-blue arcanes if you want to go upgrade a bunch of stuff with that. As far as your troop, it gains a bunch of attack, life, and armor, and if there are 13 plus reds, it also creates some skulls. It's okay, nothing really particularly special. If you're looking for a 13 plus red mechanic, you're probably using Queen Titania or Thrall instead. So very rarely we'll be using something like this. One other issue with this is he doesn't actually use red himself. Like, full Taurus teams, like 4x Taurus teams, do use red, but he himself does not, which makes it a little bit clunkier. Not to mention the 50% mana start for this kingdom if you're not using Shaman hero class is a green-blue, and if you're not using Shaman hero class, yeah, you're going to want to use that, so this being green-blue makes it very limited on when on Earth you could ever use this. Its traits are pretty average, though it does get enraged when it gets a kill, which I guess is okay relative to everything else that it does. Overall, it's not really something you're going to bring out. It's usable, but there's just no reason to bring it out compared to other options that exist within the game, particularly if you're building a pure Taurus team, which, you know, that's one of the few situations you would possibly bring it out, but there's already so many things that cover that category that not really worth doing. One thing that's interesting, which I don't normally always mention, however, I do try to mention on slightly more relevant weeks, but Wild Plains and Tauruses have 10% this week. This is relevant because almost the entirety of Wild Plains, like 80-90% of it, is Taurus, so a lot of things do have 20% bonus this week, including the Shaman hero class, as well as a good bulk of the Wild Plains kingdom, particularly all the Taurus ones. So a lot of bonus to be had there as far as stats, which might be useful for Guild War teams, which is why I mention it, as we do have Guild Wars this week. Don't forget to sell your defend teams. Make sure to use the correct color team on every single day. And it might be worth incorporating, maybe not onto your defend teams, but onto your offensive teams, maybe for a day or two. Green Day is a particularly good day for it. Red Day, I believe, as well. You can actually get away with a 4x Taurus team, so worth potentially considering due to the 20% additional stats that it has this week. As far as the event key drop table is concerned, as we mentioned, it is a Wild Plains event week, so it is the Wild Plains drop table. I would say this is pretty skippable for the most part. It's a very weird kingdom in that there's a lot of gnolls here. These gnolls have really good counters to specific colors on Guild Wars. So if you don't have these yet, if you're a newer player, you might want to throw down some event keys, as there's a lot you can end up getting. You can get Gnoll, which completely counters on Brown Day. You can end up getting yourself Wild Fang, which does it for Yellow Day, and so on and so forth. There's even a troop that summons them, too, under the legendary. Queen Moonclaw, which we also have to use for the trial event, ends up summoning a random Gnoll. You might notice that there aren't really a Gnoll typing underneath them. For example, if I go to Wild Fang here, it doesn't say Gnoll anywhere here. It says Wild Fang, Wild Plains, War Gear. Nowhere here is their icon that says there's a Gnoll. This is one of a couple categories in the game, like spiders and a few others I'm forgetting of, that the typing does not actually exist, but there are troops considered under that category. And this is one of those categories, and they're pretty good for Guild Wars, which conveniently it is Guild Wars this week, as they do have a really hard counter to specific colors, like this one does it for purple, so on and so forth. So, yeah, you do have that, so you can pick those up for Guild War if you so choose. Aside from that, if you're trying to get a Mythic, you're likely looking for Lord of Slaughter. It's a really ridiculously good Mythic. The problem is, if you're doing it through event keys rather than waiting until it comes in Soulforge, it is basically a 1 in 3,000 chance or so, roughly, give or take a little, because there's 3 Mythics within the drop table. So that's a little unfortunate. It's pretty low chance. You can end up getting... There's basically 3 mythics here. One really good, one very average, and one horrifically bad. So overall, I would say it comes out to average value as far as opening event keys. Where Lord of Slaughter is a ridiculously good one. Catcher's the Bull is generally outcast by like Tesla and stuff like that as far as boost ratio troops. But you know, it can still be usable. It's not horrible. It's really bad against stealthy, but aside from that, it does some pretty bulky damage. And this thing does less damage than like an AoE legend. Even its traits are horrible. The average AoE legend is stronger than this thing. Not to mention that mechanic in general is a little bit weaker these days, so it just doesn't do enough damage is its biggest issue. That's with 20% too, its damage right here. And even then, it just doesn't have enough boost ratio. Other things you might be looking for is if you don't want a 50% mana start off of Shaman hero class, you can end up doing it off of King Minos. So that's also a thing you can go for. But overall, I would say it's a pretty skippable week unless you're just looking to upgrade to Kingdom or get a few very select things that aren't the Mythics. Though, if you do want to try your luck on the Mythics, good luck on the Lord of Slaughter or whatever you need. Anyways, I didn't actually mention what isn't in drop table, but if I'm not mistaken, it is just the 4 faction troops. The one from the Labyrinth, which will have a Tuesday faction event for tomorrow. And those are the only 4. Just the 4 Labyrinth troops. Everything else that you see here is indeed in drop table. Anyways, as far as other things that we have going on this week, we have 2 guild-related events. One is good old Guild Wars. And, of course, just make sure to use the correct color team, set all your defend teams, help out your guild with that, and you just get a little bit of points to help get a little bit of gems. Guild War loot has always been kind of bad unless you're in bracket 1, so unfortunately not much there. As far as the World event, oddly enough, even though we don't have a campaign right now, we will next week, though we don't this week because we're getting a patch tomorrow, guaranteed. But as far as this is concerned, we do have extra skull and spell damage, and it's very straightforward, it's just rarity order. So just don't take the Gorble and you'll be good to go. Aside from that, you do get more for taking the same room over and over again. So for example, I have 4 Goblin Kings here, so I probably want to prioritize Goblin King more than whatever the other legend is, just because we'll rack up a little bit more points. But eventually you're just going to get to the point where you're just skipping over the worst room, and you'll just reach that point. It'll just all be the worst room, and then you just keep taking one spot over and over and over again. So just rarity order, very straightforward as far as the rooms that you need to take. And having access to both skulls and spell damage allows you to use a few more teams than you normally would be able to. We're under a Wild Plains restriction, but as far as things that are pretty usable this time around, we have access to Catcher's the Bull, Lord of Slaughter. We have the 50% mana start off of King Minos if you don't want to go the Shaman class route. Aside from that, if there's a lot of a single color in a battle, you can technically use the Knolls. Probably not worth it compared to just killing them out with Lord of Slaughter or something similar, but a strategy worth considering. Of course, we have the Mekatar if you need something super cheap. You even get it on the Tuesday faction event. Not only can you shard for it at any time, even right now. However, you can also just get some while spending some gems. Like if you need to still get the weapon for the Tuesday faction for the Labyrinth, you're going to get like a copy of 2 of Mekatar automatically, guaranteed, just from doing that. So you can end up getting them there if you want, or just throw the Chaos Shards on the Labyrinth whenever you want. Just get 3 copies very easily. There are pretty good weapons here, a lot of good synergy ones that you're probably going to need, most notably Primal Axe and Rage Weaver. Primal Axe does it based on Wild Plains, which you're restricted to, so your whole team will be Wild Plains, except maybe Hero if you choose not Shaman. And the other one is Rage Weaver. Creates a bunch of red, and a lot of the better Tauruses within the game do use red, like in this team. And you get a pretty nice boost ratio based on how many Tauruses you have in your team for a little bit extra damage. It's not like a huge amount, but with the extra spell damage that you have stacking with it for the event, it will hit enough to one-shot for the earlier range and double-shot at the later range. So as long as you're still in the range where it's one-shotting, two-shotting, you should be able to get away with this. Get a bunch of red into whatever your strongest Taurus is, or whatever the most accessible one is, which in this case is Mekatar, and just go from there. So those 2 weapons will be pretty handful, both of which are in the Soul Forge this week too, if you need to pick any of them up. Anyways, as far as other things we have going on this week, this Tuesday, most notably, we have 7.0 patch. Actually, we've been having a little calendar thing happening for the countdown. But yeah, 1 day and 14 hours from now. Actually, technically, it's not exactly that time because the patch itself is coming in basically whenever we do Tuesday night stream, like the time we normally stream, like that exact time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, is the exact time the patch normally hits, give or take an hour, depending on how it rolls out. That is normally around the time that'll hit, which is not this timer. This timer, I believe, is the daily timer, and not actually the timer for when the patch is hitting, which is kind of weird, but it's just simply for the reward, since that sets every single day, which is different than when they normally do the patch time. Anyways, yeah, we have big 7.0 patch, biggest thing happening all week, and pretty much only thing happening all week, to be honest, but obviously it's a pretty big thing. It's very rare that we get a 0.0 patch, and it's actually almost the longest time we've gone between 0.0 patches, between 6.0 and 7.0. I believe this is the first time ever they ever hit a 0.9.5, as in a number 0.9.5. Normally, like by like something 0.7, they're already to like the 0.0. Like let's say 5.7, and then they went to like 6.0 or something similar. They really milked it all the way until 7.0 this time around, which is one of the longest times we've had between a 0.0 patch. And 0.0 patches tend to be pretty large. A lot of really big ones have happened over the years. 2.0, which is traits being existing, because traits didn't exist at the time in that whole system. 3.0 was like the entirety of Underworld, which is huge, and technically a whole new kingdom system, since they stopped adding kingdoms and then started doing the whole Underworld thing for a while, and just adding Underworld factions and stuff like that. So they tend to be pretty large. It looks like this big thing this time around is probably going to be shiny cards, and whatever that ends up entailing. It looks like it could, aside from visually affecting them, it looks like it can also end up potentially lowering the mana cost, or increasing the gem spawns, or increasing damage, or maybe increasing boost ratios. There's a lot of number of things that it can end up doing, so be curious to see how it works. And hopefully it'll be data mined, because if the game doesn't tell you what it's being upgraded to, it might be a little annoying to figure out which ones are worth upgrading or not. Though, of course, anything that's already strong is still going to be strong. Though, who knows, maybe we'll make some things that aren't that strong actually viable again. It could be a great time to rework some things that aren't as good and make their shiny variants actually usable. So we'll just have to wait and see and what exactly all that does, as it has potential to be huge. Anyways, as far as Soulforge this week, most noteworthy mythic I would say is probably Sycorax if you're going to go for anything. Normally not a fan of mana accumulation mythics, but this is among one of the best in the entire game for it. Particularly good at creating blue, green, and brown, even though it can do any of the 6 colors. It chooses a color and then doubles it and creates 3 additional. It's the same effect that the trolls have for only 12 mana, which might seem bad that it does it for more than double that. However, the biggest benefit that it has is that it gets to choose. So any given time, it can go for whatever is more. Let's say there's like 12 green on the board, but only 4 brown, and you were like using a troll that doubles brown. Well, in that case, you can just go onto green and get your 24 green, actually technically plus 3, so what is that, 27 green onto the board total. So it has a lot more flexibility. And it's really good on teams that end up needing green, blue, or brown, as it's the easiest one they can feed into. Because if you target any other color, it needs to have something else on the team that mana accumulates back into it. Whereas if you're doing green, blue, or brown, it pretty much is infinite into itself. Because you can always pick something that's like 12 plus on the board more often than not, or at least 10 plus. And you have a pretty good chance of actually turning every single time. The biggest issue is just getting all the way back to full mana, as 25 mana cost is a little bit hard to feed to. But hey, if the shiny card variant makes it lower mana cost, that would make it slightly easier to end up doing the infinite loop for. It's also particularly good on things that have life boost ratio teams. There are very few life boost ratio teams that are even remotely viable in the current state of the game. However, if you are ever using something that has a life boost ratio, this is pretty much the go-to option to end up feeding it. I don't think I ever end up doing the video on the Mythic, so we might as well include it here, because I don't think I ever actually covered a video on the Mythic. However, this is actually a good time to go mention it. Wand of Star, Sycorax, Aravatar, and Leprechaun. It's one of the few Aravatar teams from the previous campaign that's actually viable. Yeah, now that I think about it, I don't think I actually covered an Aravatar video, but here you go. Here's the Aravatar video. Use it with Sycorax. It's amazing. Unfortunately, there's better teams out there, but this is about the best way you can get Aravatar working. It's by no means the best Sycorax team, but it is about the best Aravatar team you could really get up to, unfortunately, as it's a pretty useless mythic. It's really mid-tier, just doesn't do enough. But, you know, anything that does benefit from a HP boost ratio, that mythic can help assist greatly, including that one. Anyways, so as far as weapons, it's pretty much just whatever you need for collection purposes. However, if you're looking to pick up a weapon for the current world event, your 2 best options are probably Primal Axe or Rage Weaver. Primal Axe boost ratios for Wild Plains, which is a restriction. It also feeds really good useful mana, green and red, the 2 most useful mana for Wild Plains. And the Rage Weaver feeds the other useful mana of creating a billion red. So you end up getting that, create a billion reds onto the board, boost on Taurus, and obviously as long as nothing on your team is dying, you're going to be getting a pretty substantial amount. It's 17 red every single time you cast it, so pretty hefty amount. Unfortunately, it doesn't feed red back into itself, but of course you could just mana accumulate with something else or just manually grab it from the board, because for shorter fights, you're just going to win after casting this pretty much, because you're going to feed every single thing on your team to max mana that uses red most likely, or pretty close to it. Then you just cast all of them, and then ideally you win the fight after that. So you generally only need to cast it once, and when you're in a mode that has enchant, which you would most likely for this event as long as you're buying tier 1, you would end up having enchant. It will get mana over time, and then you just simply cast it, get your entire team to full mana, and as all of them cast once, you'll just win the fight. And that's pretty much the whole game plan with that if you're using it for any kind of game mode. Anyways, let's now go over to the team. So all of these will be in the description below if you want to go and copy paste any of them. So, first things first, world events. We do have access to extra skull damage, so we are utilizing it for this team. For the earlier fights, you might want to go a little bit more of an AoE option. However, for the later fights, we can actually utilize the Lord of Slaughter to just absolutely obliterate everything. Not only will you have 160% extra skull damage per metal, but you also have a 100% chance to hit through their armor. So, basically do true damage directly to their HP value. So that combined with how much extra damage you have, you're basically going to one-shot everything almost the entire time. So a lot of damage to be had there. This we're just using for purely mana accumulation, feeds a bunch of green and red, which feeds directly both the manas for Lord of Slaughter and Ketris. Ketris is mostly just here to cover a little bit extra damage, maybe something lives, or they have revive, or something similar. You just Ketris them down and you'll be good to go. And we don't really have too good of an alternative fourth, but we're using a Moonclaw here. Gives you a little bit of extra attack to your green allies, which of course is mostly just Lord of Slaughter in this situation. And also gets to create some skulls. It's boosted based on green allies in this particular team. It also boosts ratios from itself, so that will be 12 skulls. It also has a null summon backup, so if your Lord of Slaughter happens to die, which it does if it misses sometimes, or at the higher level range where they're like two-shotting you, you can end up alternatively constantly having resummon into first slot. And while it is a little bit hard to determine what the null typing is, it's any of those troops that we were talking about earlier that have like that extra damage to a certain color. They're all from Wild Plains, but they're a little bit hard to tell because it's not like a typing marked on the card. Not sure if that will change next patch or at some point in the future, but it's one of a few that's pretty ambiguous as there's no real way to know what a null is. You just kind of have to know. But it's all those type of troops that have that that extra multiplier against a specific color from Wild Plains, but it's not really denoted that well within the game. Anyways, next we have the one we kind of already showed. This is mostly because it's really accessible, this Mekatar spam. Just feed it a bunch of red mana, or yellow, or both, and you'll end up just spamming this until you win. It also has silence, so you can end up disabling them if you need to have that in order for them to do less damage. You could technically even use like a Entangle on Hero and then have that, but generally you want to be using Shaman. Though Shaman does actually have Entangle. I forget what you have to give up for it, but you have to give up one of these, and you can actually Entangle at start of battle, the first slot. So not only will you have Entangle, so they do 0 attack to you, but you'll also have Silence, so it'll be a great way earlier on in the game to make sure you can get through them. Particularly the hero class isn't set up with it now, but you know, you just set it, have the Entangle, get rid of the Green Storm. Actually, I think that's what's on. You get rid of the Green Storm for Entangle, because normally you want the Green Storm on the team for a team like this, for example. You would definitely want that Green Storm. Whereas a team like this, assuming that's the one you can replace with Entangle, you definitely want to replace that with Entangle on this team, as you would have access to 0 out their attack and 0 out their spells, meaning effectively, if all goes well, they will hit you with absolutely nothing, which is very convenient. Next, we have ourselves the faction event for the Labyrinth. This is a red-green restriction, which means we can run very standard Ruane. You're allowed to use any colored weapon. For the higher one, I was going to show an Ubistet team, but I figured we go down the Wolf-Garrick route. You can end up doing Todd Wolf-Garrick, which is basically Rope Dart Ubistet, just under a different category. Unfortunately, we can't use the Empower, because normally you use, oh gosh, I forget its name. It's green-blue and has Empower and feeds green to everything in Hunter's Mark first slot. I can't remember its name, but there's that War Gear that's normally used on this team. However, we're just using Leprechaun. That doesn't mean we're one less War Gear down for his boost ratio. But basically, you just poke with Todd until you get them into chip range, kill with Wolf-Garrick. If they happen to have Immune to Devour, throw Curse on them with Wand, and you're good to go. So, yeah, the Todd Wolf-Garrick team has become a lot better ever since Wand. And I'm not sure if I've actually showed in the video. I've mentioned it on stream a couple times, a couple different variants of it. But I'm not sure if I ever mentioned in the video, so yeah, you can run this. I'll probably mention it again whenever we have a week where we can run the other Empower version of it, which is slightly better, but, you know, Leprechaun's still a great mana accumulator. It just makes it so Todd has a little bit less gem spawn spam, but it does make it more consistent to get your starting mana, if nothing else. As far as Pure Faction, the most noteworthy thing to note is the Horned Guardian must die. You should throw every single thing you have at killing their Horned Guardian. It is very bulky and very good at not dying, between 50% score reduction, a big armor gain, and most importantly, barrier. This is very annoying to get rid of on the opposing team, so you basically just want to spam every single one of your Mekatar until the Horned Guardian is dead. If your Horned Guardian is alive on the final fight and theirs is dead, you basically auto-win, as this thing is near unkillable. Unfortunately, it doesn't gain attack like some of the others, where it gains like armor, attack, plus barrier. It does, unfortunately, only gain armor, which is not ideal, but, you know, still getting some value in there, if nothing else. And we're 50% mana starting it. There is a second way to 50% mana start. It is King Minos. The other way is Shaman Hero class, where you can 50% mana start your entire team. So overall, pretty useful. But you can also just do it with Shaman on most teams. But given that this is a Pure Faction team, you're restricted from using Hero. So in this particular situation, it is a great option, as every single thing here is a Taurus, as far as the faction is concerned. As far as the Shaman Hero class, you're restricted specifically to Tauruses from Wild Plains, which is fine, because almost all of the Tauruses exist in Wild Plains. And we're basically just running a Black Manacle quick kill team. We're using Soothsayer for the brown mana. It also has Empower to feed you a little bit of mana if you truly need it. A little bit of board control there. Gives you 1 magic as well, back when 1 magic used to actually be useful. There was a time when Soothsayer's 1 magic was actually utilized. Back when magic values were closer to like 10 or so. But these days, obviously, 1 magic gain to everything is near 0 in how much it's giving. But, you know, you can still use it for its a little bit of mana accumulation. Just keep spamming Black Manacles until you win. If you get a Devour, it'll go even quicker because you can take the skulls there. As far as the trial is concerned, actually, we might as well just go to the actual trial kingdom. So if we go over to Wild Plains, which does reach 26 stars as this week, right over here. So as far, no, that's not what I wanted. As far as trials are concerned, we're going to be up against this team right over here. And essentially you want to run it something around this or so. There's a few other ways you can kind of switch it up, depending if you want to like utilize its attack, but I mostly just want to make sure it's nice and safe so it can keep summoning. But something along the lines of this. So Gorgon, really tanky, 50% score reduction. There might be a time where you can actually sacrifice Sunweaver, depending, or even Soothsayer, because Soothsayer is the most useless thing on this team. So if you wanted to, you could just not cast Soothsayer and go... There's a lot of ways you can run this, and run it like this, and then keep getting the null in front of it. Honestly, I almost feel like this might be better. I haven't actually tried it yet, but yeah, this might be better. Just don't cast Soothsayer, let it sacrifice itself, and then you can get null summons in front of your Gorgon. And then you have your back 3 covering every color. So never mind. Yeah, do this. This actually works out a little bit better. Just don't cast this because he actually doesn't block mana. I think the main reason I didn't move him up initially was, oh, he'll block a mana slightly. But he actually doesn't. If anything, he actually helps with mana. He has Empower, so as long as you don't cast him, he's blocking 0 mana. And he gives you a little bit of extra brown, which, you know, that's not too big a deal if you sacrifice it. Because the only thing using is Gorgon, though technically your summons off of Knolls might summon it. I think there's like 1 or 2 of them that use brown, so you wouldn't get the extra mana there, but it's not really that big a deal. Maybe you just do it like this, sacrifice your Soothsayer, don't ever cast it. Gorgon for a little bit of chip damage, Sunweaver to buff up your Gorgon, so it never dies, and Queen Moonclaw to summon backup Knolls, which you could also end up using Sunweaver to buff. And yeah, these you could just use to counter whatever color, if it happens to synergize well, or just let it die and just have your Gorgon be your new first slot again. And as I mentioned, pretty much everything here has like 20% this week, or a good majority of them. So you can end up getting a lot of value from that. So it'll make this a little bit easier this time around. So pretty nice, because not every single time when we have a weekly event for do they get that much extra stats. So a little bit extra to make it a little bit easier. And that's pretty much the game plan. Though in all fairness, so does the enemy team. So I guess it's not really making it too much easier because I just realized there's 3 20% on the enemy team and 1 10% on the enemy team. And we have the same thing. It's 3 20% and 1 10%. So I guess it won't make that big of a difference, but still. And the team's not honestly that bad. So Skeleros you could actually use to your own advantage too. If you use Gorgon to make sure there's not as many skulls, or potentially even Soothsayer if you wanted to, but mostly Gorgon, you can try to deny the skulls from the board. So when Skeleros doubles the amount of skulls on board with 2 extra, it'll miss. And then you can simply use it for your buffed up troop that you're feeding attack into, either your Null or your Gorgon, and you'll be good to go. So overall, honestly, should be pretty straightforward. There's not much on the opposing team that's really particularly threatening for the most part. This like earlier on in the game kind of is, but not later in the game. Yeah, they have pretty average options, and Skeleros, similar to that one other event we had, is almost a 5 versus 3, in that as long as you keep using your Gorgon to deny skulls, you will potentially be able to go get full value from the enemy Skeleros without even having it on your team, because originally, before this team got switched, Skeleros was actually on our team, but even on the enemy team, it is still technically on our team if you just deny the skulls with Gorgon, so it's not going to gain enough skulls to poke you with them. So, yeah, it's basically a 5 versus 3, again, so kind of convenient. Anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for now. As I mentioned, big 7.0 tomorrow. We'll be streaming it tomorrow night. And going over all that. Tonight, we'll mostly just be wrapping up everything for the week, doing all the trials, all that kind of stuff. And then tomorrow will be the final day that we'll be streaming for about a week. And then we'll cover a little recap, hopefully Wednesday morning. And that'll be like the last video we'll have for about a week as we go away to see family. Anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful week. I will see you guys in the 7.0 patch. And gosh, we'll have a lot to go over with that, that's for sure. And hopefully it'll be something fun to grind in there. Anyways, guys, enjoy your week. I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for watching.